So the first thing you want to do as soon as you get the engine out is start turning the crank pulley. Only turn it clockwise and until you're at top dead center. How you know if you're at top dead center is this white mark on the crank pulley here will be facing up in line with these metal prongs. Now you can turn it 360 degrees and see the white mark again, but it may not be top dead center. So to hit that, you need the white mark there. You need this number 1 on your intake cam to be in line with the exhaust cam on the front bank. And then on the rear bank, you need this line to line up with this notch right there. And that's the first thing you want to do, is get it to TDC so that you have a frame of reference. So the list on some of the things I need to do on this engine are timing belt, water pump, lost motion assemblies, valve adjustment, and I want to inspect the clutch. Now, I don't want to order an entire clutch kit if I don't need to. If I can get the flywheel resurfaced and if I could reuse my pressure plate, then I'll just inspect the clutch disc itself and see if it needs a new one. I'll probably put a new one in anyway, but so since I don't want to take up too much of my friend's time in his shop, what I need to do is remove the transmission first. So that's my plan of approach. I've changed what I'm doing. I'm going to remove the transmission first, inspect it, order whatever parts, and then while I'm waiting for those parts, I'll start doing the rest of everything here. LMAs, the butterfly screws, and timing belt, water pump, valve adjustment. The first step, I believe, will be me undoing the axle nut. You have to unnotch it here where it was hammered in. Take that off. I believe it's a 36 millimeter. And that should allow me to gain access to loosening up the axle. I may then take off the upper part of this subframe. I'm just kind of doing this by common sense. I'm not reading the manual. I probably should be, but next step, I believe, is to remove the starter. I do have a theory that I may not have to, and that I could just pull off the whole housing with the starter on it, but it's easy to take off, so I'm just going to take it off. If I find out later that I didn't have to, then oh well. So I started taking off this upper part of the subframe. I took out this transmission mount bolt there. I may regret that. I might have to put it back in to get some of the other bolts around the bottom of the tranny. Remove both the front and rear transmission mounts. Now I'm going to start chasing wires, seeing where those go to get them off the transmission. Okay, so back to the transmission. Been a slow day, had a lot of distractions, a lot of trying to figure stuff out. Originally I was going to take off this top part of the subframe and just take off this whole bit of suspension here and pull this completely off, and then pull the transmission straight out, and as I pulled this off, the axle would stay and come off. Instead, I've decided not to do that, and what I've done is I've taken off the rear transmission mount, the front transmission mount, and now I'm going to use a ball joint separator to take off this bottom ball joint on both the driver's and passenger side, and pop it out, tilt it this direction, like that, and get the axle to fall out. Now that this is just kind of sitting on the cradle, it's not really attached anywhere, at least not too many places, I should be able to just kind of jack up or use a cherry picker to kind of lift the block up and pull the transmission housing off the bell housing. Alright, so what I did was I took off the lower ball joint and this one right here where the toe adjustment is, and I was able to pull out the rotor, get the axle out, sprayed a little PB blaster in there first, did the same exact thing on this side, and I think I've got an idea what I'm going to do now. So I have to disconnect the front bank exhaust from in there, because otherwise I'll have to remove this bar, and I don't want to do that. I will have to, well, that'll lift right up. I'll also have to remove this transmission mount off of the actual transmission. Reason being, if I lift it straight up, this will also hit the bar. So I need to take that off, and I think that's it. I guess I'll find out when I hook up the cherry picker to lift it up, but the plan right now, and I keep making plans and things keep changing, but the plan is right now to lift this up, get the cart out of there, lower it on the ground, and pull the transmission off. Alright, so I have both the mounts off of the transmission. This thing is just hanging here, and this comes from the rear headers from the bank. I'm sorry, the front bank. And it took me a long time to get it off because I didn't realize that somebody had welded the end of these, so it took me like a half an hour to figure out why I was rounding off the nuts until I finally figured it out and took a Sawzall and just cut them. But yeah, so I'll have to get some new ones of those for up there. But now it's ready for me to lift up off the subframe, put it on the floor on wood, and with the subframe out of the way, the transmission should be easy to take off. Well, hopefully. Alright, another day. So, today, an attempt to get the transmission off. Getting the passenger side axle off, drive shaft off of the intermediate shaft took me an hour of prying and hitting with a ball-peen hammer, and nothing was happening. So if anybody runs into this issue, which I'm sure people do, usually they come out easy, but I had extreme difficulty with it, as I'm sure others have. But this right here, pickle fork, pried right against the axle hub there. It came right out, right off of the intermediate shaft as soon as I put this on. So that's the answer for that, if you have any issues. I believe the next thing I'm going to do is take off the starter, which I'm not even sure if it's necessary. It might come off with the whole bell housing, but it's only a couple bolts, so I'll take it off anyway. This mount is going to have to come off completely because it's attached to the block as well as the transmission, or at least I have to take one of the bolts off on the left side, I think. That one. And I think that's it. Then just the transmission housing bolts. Another thing I should mention is in the book it tells you to remove the ball joints. So I removed this one. Never use a fork, by the way. Use this style. What did I do with it? Right here. If you're going to take off ball joints. And don't keep cranking until they pop. Crank until there's tension, and then take a little ball-peen hammer and just tap the side where the ball joint would be, and the high frequency from that should pop it off. Now, however, there's still a risk of damaging your ball joints when you do that. And so there's actually a technical service bulletin, a TSB. I didn't look at it, but I was told this, that they want you to, instead of taking off the ball joints, take off this through bolt here and the same one there on the lower control arms. You're supposed to mark your camber adjustments first, where they are, before you do that, so you can get back to your proper camber when you put it back, or at least close. The reason they want you to do that is so that you don't hurt the ball joints, and the reason you don't want to take off the upper control arms, and this is to sway this all out of the way to get the axle out, but anyway, the reason you don't want to do the upper ones is apparently those are spring loaded and you can have some issues with that. So yeah, I did it not the correct way, but it worked. So for anybody following along, taking out your transmission, take out that bolt and that bolt on the lower control arm and swing the whole thing up. Removing the starter is pretty straightforward, but I'm trying to be detailed, so I'll go over it. So you gotta undo this little plug here. There appears to be a 17 millimeter back there, and a 17 millimeter down here at the bottom. See that? As far as the bell housing bolts, there's one here. Again, you have to take off that mount. One up there. One right here to the rear side of the thermostat housing. Another one in here. I can't see it with the camera, but it's right there. And that may be it, actually. Yeah, looks like that's it. Oh, I may have to take off this intermediate shaft. I don't know if it'll pull straight off of it. We'll see. There's another right here underneath this bracket going this way. Okay, I got the intermediate shaft out. This part right here on the mount and the brackets, you gotta undo these three, and this part pries apart. It's a little hard. There's some pry marks from whoever was in here previously, but I got it apart. Took a little bit of finessing, but it came out. Alright, so I got all of the transmission mounting bolts out. There's some facing this direction, and then there's some on the back side facing this direction, going from the engine block into the transmission, that have to be removed. Now, I started separating it using a pry bar, going back and forth, and there's these dowels. There's one on the other side too. I think that's the only two. And I was having issues. It didn't want to come off. Then I remembered somebody saying something about the clutch release fork, and I've had friends that said that they just pulled the transmission right off, and I've had other people say you must absolutely disengage the release fork. So to do that, here's where the clutch sleeve was, and you pull off this dust cover here, and then here's the clutch release fork, and I already had it pulled back a little bit, so hopefully I don't have to put it back or anything, but I just gave it a little tug, and it came out. So I hope that's all I had to do. It doesn't look fun to get back in there, but let me see if I can, just the hell of it. Yeah, okay, so now it's back in. So you just grab it and pull, and it comes off. So hopefully I can continue to pry a little bit here and separate this more. We will see. Eventually it will come off.